My family thought they had won. They stole my inheritance, destroyed my memories, and left me with nothing. But they never expected the secret my grandfather hid for me. Stay with me until the end to see how the truth changed everything.
My name is Clara Vance. I spent 5 years saving my grandfather's company. But none of that mattered. I stood in the pouring rain, watching my sister and brother throw my life out onto the curb. Beatrice sneered, hoisting the hand-carved mahogany clock our grandfather Arthur had built. Looking down from the porch with cold disdain, she shouted, "Go back to the gutter where you belong, Clara." Julian laughed, calling me a glorified servant, as Beatrice heaved the heavy clock over the railing. It was a deliberate strike against the only thing I had left of my grandfather. The clock hit the muddy driveway with a sickening crack. The wood splintered and the glass shattered, mirroring the destruction of our family's honor. I dropped to my knees in the mud and gathered the broken pieces with trembling hands. It felt like they hadn't just destroyed a clock. They had shattered the last piece of my grandfather I still had. I drove blindly to my grandfather's grave, the car skidding to a halt at the gates. I was desperate and isolated, pushed to the edge by their cruelty. Collapsing against Arthur's cold headstone, my tears mixing with the rain, I cried until my chest ached. It was my first complete emotional breakdown, a moment of pure, raw grief. I clutched a piece of the broken clock to my chest, the dark, wet wood, all I had left to hold on to as the cold rain washed over me. While Julian and Beatrice spent their trust funds, I was in the office at dawn every single day. I was working tirelessly to keep our grandfather's dream alive, even when I was the only one there. I was the one who powered this company, moving through the silent rows of desks, fueled by a quiet dedication to the business my grandfather built. I pored over every spreadsheet and every growth chart, my eyes scanning the data long before the rest of the world woke up. But my professional pitches were met with cruel entitlement. I fought to save the legacy accounts, while the boardroom looked on with disinterested boredom. Then my siblings would stroll in, flanked by shopping bags and arrogance, treating the business like their personal playground. Beatrice would openly mock me, announcing to the entire office that I was just a glorified charity case to be tolerated. Julian joined in, laughing and telling the whispering staff that they never expected much from me anyway. I kept my dignity through those storms, my jaw set with a resolve they couldn't break. I remembered when Grandfather Arthur first taught me the business. He told me that true strength lies in quiet resilience, a memory that kept me anchored. But the humiliation reached a new peak when I returned home and found movers carrying boxes out of my childhood bedroom. Every familiar corner felt strangely empty. The shelves where my books once stood were bare. The framed memories grandfather and I had collected over the years had vanished without a trace. Standing in the doorway, I realized they weren't just taking my inheritance. They were slowly erasing every sign that I had ever belonged there. The humiliation intensified when I returned to the estate to find my childhood bedroom completely gutted. My personal photos had been burned in a backyard bonfire, and I watched through the glass as my memories curled and turned to ash. Beatrice stood on the patio, watching the smoke rise, telling me I had been legally disowned. She sneered. "This house is for the true heirs now, not the help." I walked back into my ruined, empty room and collapsed onto the bare floorboards, sobbing in deep despair. It was my second major emotional breakdown, realizing they had erased every physical trace of my childhood from our family home. Desperate to stabilize the company, I went to secure our business accounts, exhausted, heartbroken, and running out of options. But the news was devastating. Julian and Beatrice had already drained $150,000 using a forged will. Julian walked into the bank lobby, looking smug and wearing a tailored suit that contrasted sharply with my vulnerability. He sneered and tossed a single crumpled dollar bill at my feet, the worn paper falling in slow motion. He looked down at me with a condescending smirk and said, "Use this to buy a bus ticket out of our sight." He told me that our parents had always favored them because they actually deserved the family legacy. This painful golden child dynamic cut deeper than any financial loss, leaving me ruined, isolated, and questioning my own worth. But then, a quiet memory of Grandfather Arthur flashed in my mind, remembering his final words. I returned to the backyard at dusk, slipping past the security lights and approaching the ancient willow tree at the edge of the property. Inside a hidden hollow in the trunk, beneath the weathered birdhouse, I uncovered Grandfather's real bypass trust document and a secure USB drive containing financial proof of my siblings' fraud. Holding the documents, a powerful wave of hope washed over me. I finally held the evidence that could change everything. I presented these findings to our attorney, Mr. Henderson, showing him my grandfather's real intent. My hope was instantly crushed when Julian and Beatrice retaliated, bursting into the office with a police officer, their faces contorted with rage and triumph. They presented a fake notary stamp, accusing me of theft and threatening immediate arrest. Beatrice called me an embezzler in front of the witnesses, her eyes cold and calculating. Despite the intensity, I tried to maintain a mask of composure. She pointed a finger directly at me and delivered her final threat. "You are pathetic, Clara, and you are going to jail." I suffered my third emotional breakdown, sobbing on the cold courthouse steps, feeling utterly defeated by their endless cruelty. But as I sat there, I remembered Grandfather's words that true strength lies in quiet resilience. My devastation began to shift into a flicker of desperate resolve. My fingers trembled as I gripped the USB drive, realizing my active search for the truth was finally about to be validated in the courtroom. My name is Clara Vance. After 5 years of saving Vance Logistics, only to be betrayed by my family, I finally stood before Judge Evelyn Sterling as the formal probate trial began. My siblings, Beatrice and Julian, had called me a glorified servant and a charity case, but I stood tall, refusing to shrink under their glares as they whispered in the shadows. I kept my dignity, remembering Arthur's words, "True strength lies in quiet resilience." I looked at the bench and said, "Let the records speak for themselves, Your Honor." Judge Sterling demanded an immediate forensic audit of the documents my siblings had used to drain our accounts and disown me. I sensed the tide starting to turn. The forensic expert finally revealed the truth. The signature on Julian's document had been copied from an old report card. Under intense questioning, their notary public finally broke, confessing to accepting Julian's bribes to backdate the forged documents. Judge Sterling banged her gavel, her voice echoing through the silent courtroom. "This court finds the defendants guilty of forgery, and they will be remanded into custody immediately." The courtroom erupted as Julian and Beatrice were led out in handcuffs. My grandfather's true legacy was finally restored to me. Justice was a relief, but the true victory was knowing that their endless cruelty could no longer touch me. I watched them go, realizing my active search for the truth was finally validated, and the nightmare was over. I returned to the restored Vance estate the next morning, the air crisp and peaceful under the bright morning sun. Walking up the driveway, the years of pain and exhaustion began to wash away, replaced by a deep sense of belonging. The order of my life had finally been restored. Every step I took now felt steady and certain. I carefully placed my grandfather's repaired mahogany clock back on the mantel, its wood no longer splintered, but whole and polished. Its steady, warm ticking began to fill the quiet halls once more, marking the return of my grandfather's spirit to the house. Standing in the center of the room, I realized that while they tried to erase my childhood, the heart of our home was still beating. I sat in grandfather's old study and found a final, handwritten letter from him tucked away in the lockbox. He wrote that he always knew my siblings would try to take what they had not earned, but he also knew that my quiet strength would prevail. He validated my worth, calling me the true heart of Vance Logistics. "You have always been my greatest legacy, Clara." Looking out at the willow tree, I knew I was finally home. A deep, lasting peace settled over me as I prepared to lead our legacy into the future. With the trial behind me and my grandfather's true legacy finally restored, I returned to Vance Logistics, not as a charity case, but as its rightful leader. The staff, who had once whispered in the wake of my siblings' mockery, now stopped their work to show profound respect. My years of quiet dedication were finally being validated by those who saw the truth. I offered a subtle, dignified nod, my head held high. The humiliation and the golden child dynamic that had once defined my life were gone, replaced by a resolve that had been forged in the storm.